purposes only. Although I am a licensed clinician, I'm also just a person. I love to be able to be in my real life and speak from that point. And that's where this podcast is coming from. So enjoy.
Searching for truth, looking for answers. There must be a way to another day.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Keanvenient Truth, episode 90.
Whoop, whoop. Do your thing. You haven't done that in a while. We should add that back in.
Yeah.
We stopped doing it.
It's more of the sound like when you're at the club and it's like, like they like have that sound come in whenever they like switch songs or whatever.
Yeah.
And then when you hear it, you're like, oh shit,
And the guy's like,
Yep.
Anyways.
So I hope everyone's had a great weekend. We have been in a hot, beautiful, beachy Florida area. So
we took
got
a little
some
time
sun.
off.
I feel like I'm darker. So good. I was looking pale for me.
Oh my God, you look at me.
And I actually feel like I still look pale because I put that stupid sunblock on my face because I didn't want to get so dark like I did last time because I was like peeling. But then the rest of my body got really dark, and now my face still looks like I need some fucking sun. Now I got to go back to Florida.
You're fine.
It's an excuse to go to Florida.
I have my mouthpiece in because I totally forgot that we were gonna do this, and I was like, I'm not gonna take it out because it's already in. I don't know.
You sound like you have a list.
Do I?
With it on, yeah. I mean, lists are cool.
Well, we'll see how it works out.
Okay.
I'm just really comfortable right now. I was actually ready to just go to bed, but then I was like, oh shit, we got to do this. All right.
So this is how we sleep. We both have actually the same mouthpiece. My dog, our dog,
this is how we are.
A piece of mine. So now I have like a half of it shorter here and the rest of it long here. But we kiss each other goodnight with our mouthpieces in.
Mm-hmm. And we sleep with our fuzzy freaking warm hoodies.
Because it's cold out here still.
Oh man, I miss Florida already.
Oh, damn, Florida.
Oh, it's so
it's
nice.
Like when you live in Florida, you really, really, really forget like the amazing, like because you're living in it. So you're just like, I can go to the beach whenever.
Yeah, and then nobody down there goes to the beach.
No one down there goes to the beach. Like when you live in Florida, you don't go to the beach. You know, it's like whatever. But then we went back home to visit and went to the beach, and I was like floored.
That was a great beach.
This is the most amazing beach I've ever been to in my life.
It really was, though. It was nice.
Like,
it wasn't a lot of people.
Gorgeous.
Like, the water was super clear. It was in West Palm or Palm Island, Palm Beach Island.
It was in Palm Beach, yeah.
Yeah.
We were living a bougie life.
Super bougie. It was nice though. It was really nice.
Anyway, it was gorgeous.
Yeah.
So tonight's episode, we're going to talk about something that is actually very common in today's world. I also think it's like the term is sometimes overused, but you see it a lot in families. It's a big deal. And so we're going to get into some codependency. In terms of really like what that is, because I'm really going to break it down more. As well as, how it comes out, what it looks like, meaning like the face of codependency, right? So the certain characteristics that also go along with it. And yeah, that's going to be today's episode. I did also hear something else that I'm going to tie into this codependency thing from everyone's favorite Elon Musk. But I do need to tie it in.
Okay. So codependency.
Give me what you think codependency is, and then I'll go from there.
Well, let's first define it for people. Like,
well, no, I mean, I kind of want to hear what you think it is first, because whatever you think it is, like, so like right now between you and I, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, excuse me. Excuse me. Between, excuse me, between you and I, like regarding this conversation we're about to have on codependency, for example, out of the both of us, you're like the like the regular person in society who maybe thinks they know what codependency really is, but doesn't really know what it is, right?
Okay.
So why don't you give me your definition and then I can go from there.
Well, I've never actually thought about the definition of it, but I relate it to like somewhat enabling, right? In a way where there's one person in the relationship that um is just, maybe they were brought up and they're used to like doing things for other people or something, and the other person is used to, grew up and was used to just taking advantage of people that did things for them. So then it's like this perfect relationship where one gives too much and the other one takes too much, and everybody's fine with it. Something like that.
Okay, yeah, right. So there's like a piece of that there, right? Which is like whenever I bring up the word codependency in session with someone, which comes up quite a bit, but whenever I do, I'll be like, you're codependent, right? And
Mm.
they're like, actually, I thought I was like rather independent. And I'm like, well, let's really kind of break it down. But whenever someone breaks it down in terms of what they understand it to be, it's always like they have it like a piece of it, And I'm like, that's a piece, very good. But there's so much more. So
explain codependency though in the technical terms.
yeah. So codependency is basically someone who is codependent lives life like this. So this is the codependent person, and this is everybody else in front of them, right?
Can be anybody.
Yeah. So this is everybody else's time, everybody else's feelings, everybody else's thoughts, everybody else's everything. And that person who's codependent comes last. Everybody else's stuff comes first. So a codependent lives life basically attaching, right, to everybody's thoughts, feelings, time, whatever it may be. And then their shit is put all the way on the back burner. Like they're like the last to even consider themselves.
So they always put themselves last.
Always. Okay. So codependent they are people who need to be needed. Now, again, if you are codependent and if you are listening to this, or if you think you're codependent, and I said they are people who need to be needed, that can sometimes rub people the wrong way. But people who are codependent, who don't know that they're codependent, don't even realize that they need to be needed, right? And that's a pretty common thing, so that's okay. But they need to be needed. So because of that, they will constantly find themselves as the people pleasers, as the people who are like, oh my God, you're so nice. Oh my God, look what you're doing. Oh my God, thank you for picking me up at 10 o'clock, even though you probably wanted to go to bed, right? Like, oh my God, thank you for being the one who always like does this and goes above and beyond, right? So they will really make sure that they are there, they are first, they are taken care of, they are doing all that stuff without even realizing that there's a secondary gain there. The secondary gain is that if I do all these things for other people, right, and I put other people first, then not only will they like me, right, and not only will I feel a part of, but then they will need me for certain things as well, which is where the codependent really, really, really kind of gets like their dopamine shot from. Okay. So hold on, let me finish. So they are people who also have self-esteem issues. So people who are codependent will often have like low self-esteem, not in every area of life, and I'll get into that, but they'll have low self-esteem. They have control issues, so a high level of anxiety, severe control issues, which makes sense, right? Because if I'm codependent and I'm making sure that I'm putting other people's time, feelings, beliefs, thoughts, everything in front of my own, there is a control aspect along with that, right? Like that means that, okay, I'm going to do all this for you, right? And be there for you with this secondary gain of that, oh, okay, maybe then you'll come back and do something for me. But that's not how life works. Then what happens over time is that the codependent gets very resentful and very angry when the people who they're there for and bending over backwards for, who, mind you, did not even ask them to do so, okay, are now not there for them. But it's like, who asked you to even do this. No one asked you to do this, right?
Mm.
So people who are codependent usually come from environments in their childhood, in life, where they have experienced emotional pain. Now, emotional pain falls on a huge spectrum, right? So we could be talking about, this really is just based on how your brain processes pain, right? Or just emotions in general. So this could be anywhere from growing up in an environment where you had, parents or a parent who was an addict alcoholic. This can go anywhere to growing up in an environment where you had a caregiver who was maybe kind of going through some kind of medical issue, whether it be cancer or whatever it is. This could be growing up in an environment where you were either witnessing abuse or being abused yourself. This could be an environment where like even like dad or someone just wasn't home a lot because of work or whatever it is, right? Whatever it is, your brain suffered some kind of emotional pain in childhood. Now, those examples that I just gave you, if you think about it and kind of break them down, are examples that where if you were a child and you were in any one of those environments, most likely you felt very powerless. You felt very powerless because what are you going to do? You're a kid, you're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, even 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and you have a parent who's an alcoholic or a drug addict. What do you really do? Like you can't really do anything like to help that situation. It's a very powerless situation. If you have a caregiver who's suffering from cancer, let's say, and you're watching them go through all their treatments or whatever it is, extremely powerless situation. You can't do anything to save that. What are you going to do, right? If you're witnessing abuse or you're being abused as a kid, another powerless situation, right? So most often it's when you were living in environments that were also like probably you were witnessing an extreme amount of like powerlessness, like you wanted to do something but you just couldn't because you were young. And what do we do when we're kids? So then what happens is as we get older, we then form this massive amount of anxiety and control, okay? Because now the brain goes, oh, now I'm older, right? Now I can actually do something about it. Now I could actually help someone. Now I can actually be there for someone.
So it's like a
But because
subconscious
of,
thing of
right,
like
but
helping.
because of, let's say, the trauma from the core, right? Because of that piece, and that was never really fully processed, understood, whatever it may have you. Now, when they get older and the codependency kicks in, now there's this like excessive need to like be there for everyone, so much so that I'm not there for myself, right? So most often you will find that people who are codependent will usually always gravitate to another person who needs some kind of taken care of in some way, shape, or form, whether it be emotionally, whether it be mentally, whether it be physically, right? Because again, codependents need to be needed. So why, if I'm codependent, which I actually am a recovering codependent, and I'll get into that, but why would I, the codependent who needs to be needed, get into a relationship with someone who's completely self-sufficient emotionally, mentally, and physically?
Mm.
That doesn't feed the codependent's need in any way, shape, or form. Actually, if anything, that's going to make the codependent feel extremely insecure because extremely powerless. They can't do anything because you don't need me.
Unless that person's an enabler in some way.
Well, the codependent is the enabler
The
also.
codependent is the enabler?
Oh,
I
yes.
thought the
enabling
enabler
also.
was the person that's kind of like, just kind of almost like taking advantage, or no, not taking advantage, but just like catering to all that shit.
The enabler, someone who it would also be the codependent person. So, for example, in a relationship where, let's say, if like the codependent is with a drug addict, let's say, or an alcoholic,
They're
okay,
enabling the
yes,
behavior.
because they will be there and help and do whatever it takes to make sure that they're okay and this and that. So much so that they'll find themselves bending over backwards, like, oh my gosh, like let's say you're dating someone. This is a true story on my account. Let's say you're dating someone and they're an addict alcoholic, and they're like they got kicked out of their apartment because their roommates kicked them out because they're drinking at like 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning, and they don't have money to pay the rent or anything like that, and they're just completely just like not taking care of their responsibilities, so they get kicked out. They go now to a hotel, but they don't have any money to fucking stay in the hotel because they're spending all their money on drugs and alcohol. Then they call the codependent. and they're like, hey, blah blah, like I just got kicked out. My roommates kicked me out. Blah blah. Like I need some money for this hotel, and the codependent's like, bing, I will come to save the day. Right? And
They're just waiting for that moment.
codependent comes in hard. You know what I'm saying? Like hard.
So then they enable.
They're enabling the addict. Yes.
All
by
right.
that behavior.
Enabling is like, what if somebody is an addict or doing non-healthy behavior,
and someone is feeding into it.
Right.
So rather than set a boundary and say, no, I'm not going to give you that money. No, I'm not going to come help you out. Like you're doing XYZ, take responsibility for it, which would be a healthy boundary to set. The codependent and the enabler rush right in to help.
But right there, that's exactly where I think the commonality of this is, like, especially when it comes to family, right?
Oh, this is huge in families.
It's because they're family. It's because it's my daughter. She's whatever, 30 years old, but like she's my daughter. I can't just let her struggle or whatever, and that becomes the enabling for that behavior.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like, but the parent is the one that actually created that behavior in the first place, right?
Yeah. So we'll get into, because there's like a lot of layers there.
Yeah.
Like in terms of family stuff. Like, so basically where you find codependency a lot is you find it a lot in family dynamics for sure. You find it in also, intimate romantic relationships. You can find it in friendships. And you can sometimes even find it in like the workplace. What's interesting about codependency though, is that it could come out in one area of your life, but not the others. So like, for example, like when I was in my old relationship, right, my abusive relationship, and I was the codependent during that situation for 5 years, like that was the only area in my life where it came out.
Everywhere else you were
everywhere else I was very assertive, very confident, very this at work, with friends, anything. So much so that when I told my friends and people the full story of what I was doing in my relationship, they were shocked. They were like, wait, what? You like, that's what you've been doing? And I'm like, yeah. And they were so confused because how they saw me was this like very independent, this and that person, because that's how I functioned at work and every other area of life.
Right.
But in the romantic area aspect of life, I didn't.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it can come out in certain areas and not others,
but it's still called the same thing then? I mean,
yeah, codependency can come out, and
I feel like they need other names, other words for it.
No, I mean, it's basically an addiction to relationships.
Because it's very like general, you know what I'm saying? Like, I guess the behavior, yes, but I mean, though the way it comes out, and whether it's like specific for like a relationship or like a family or something like that,
it doesn't matter. It's the same.
I guess
it's the same traits. It's the same thought process. It's the same thing. Like at work, let's say a codependent at work would just basically be someone who's like
a coworker
who's always going to what?
Co-worker, dependent
would be would basically be someone who like, like always is like the yes person, right? So like, let's say they're being asked to do things out of their job description, right. They're the person that always says yes. They're the person staying late from work to get this, that done. Meanwhile, they're not getting paid to do that shit.
Right. And at work, they're like the guy that everybody's like, oh yeah,
and
Johnny will do it.
Take it.
And then they get home and then they're like, fuck their lives. They're like, fuck this shit. I had to do
tapped
it.
Out.
Yeah. They have no energy for their family because they've done extra shit at work, and they're complaining about work all day long, probably to their family because they're doing all these things and they're making them do this at work.
Yes, but that's how codependent is even in a relationship. They will get angry with their partner or with their friend, feeling as though, oh, I'm doing so much for them and this and that, but without taking a step to like look at, okay, but like, what's the part that you're playing in this? Like, number one, are they asking you to do these things? And if you don't want to do them, then why are you? And why are you not saying no? Right. So they also lack severe boundaries. Like they lack the ability to set healthy boundaries severely.
Would it be safe to say, like, basically in general, like, because everybody has this friend that when you meet up with them and they're just like complaining about their relationship or work or whatever, there's a high likelihood that there's codependency there in some way, shape, or form?
No. Why would you say that?
Well, because
that would be generalizing.
Because that's why I was saying, is it safe to say? because like, you know, I don't know, is this part of codependency? Like, when people are codependent in a situation, let's just take work, right? And they're overdoing, they're saying yes to everything, even though they don't really want to do it. And are there people that do all that, then come home and they're perfectly fine and they love their lives and their jobs and they're not complaining about anything? Or are they most likely freaking, when they feel like they're in a safe area with a safe person, they're dumping on them because they fucking hate what they're doing all the time, but they're doing it to themselves?
Right. So there are stages of codependency.
Mm.
So usually what you'll find is when someone is in like the middle to like late stages of codependency, that's when you'll find that the codependent has a higher amount of anger, resentment, frustration. So then that's where the complaining
They're
comes from.
slowly starting
But
to
again,
subconsciously realize that they're
no, but they don't, they're not realizing that it's
their
them.
problem, right?
They're thinking that it's the other person who's
Mhm.
not doing anything bad. Look at me, I'm doing all this stuff and they can't even do this.
Oh, that means so they've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
Okay.
But still can't see that,
Right.
like, well, you don't have to,
Right,
right?
right.
So when I challenge people's codependency and they're like, oh my God, like I have to do this for my mom, blah, blah, because if I don't, this and that, and like I also have to go to work and like I don't want to, and blah, blah. It's just like a little like basic example. This is a really small example. Like something like that, like the challenge that I'll give is, okay, so then why don't you just say no?
Yeah. Just stop.
But that's
can't.
that's like anxiety inducing for someone.
And
who
that's
needs
where all the
codependency.
excuses come up. It's like, but it's my
Well,
son.
I can't because if I,
yeah,
because
or
if I don't, then this, and it's like, but all you would have to do is say, hey, I actually can't do it because I have to be at work in the morning and I really want to get a good night rest. So that's it, right?
Right.
But for them to say no to someone is like, oh my God, well, if I say no, then what are they going to think
They'll
of
never
me?
talk to me
Are they
again.
not going to like
Yeah.
me? Blah, blah, the whole night, all this stuff goes in their head,
When in fact, it's probably the opposite. Like there's probably some subconscious,
Well,
like between the relationship, that there might be a gained respect, even possibly,
well,
or a hate.
well, I'm actually glad you brought that up, Joe. So I always tell people, you are most likely in a relationship with someone who's unhealthy if you set a healthy boundary with them
and they get mad
and they get pissed.
Yeah.
Okay. And usually people who are codependent, again, it's just the nature of the beast, will most likely be in relationships with people who are also unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to be, because again, they need to be needed. So why would they be with someone who's completely,
Well, this is what I was talking about originally, right? When you asked me to define codependency, it's like almost those two people gravitate towards each other, right? The person that's willing to take advantage of somebody that is willing to
Of course, that's energetic. That's why you will always see someone, and I'm using just addiction as example because codependency is like 100% common in any addict or alcoholic who is like in a relationship. It's so common. So in that relationship, right, how do you think the codependent usually gravitates to an addict and the addict will always gravitate to a codependent? Why would a drug addict or an alcoholic fucking gravitate to someone who has healthy boundaries? That doesn't make any sense.
Because they're not going to get what they want, right?
That doesn't make any sense, right? So of course I'm going to gravitate to that. Now, how do you even know that? Right? How do people even know that? And that's where the whole quantum physics laws of attraction comes in, because this is energy.
It's the energy.
Right.
It's like seriously, like you're attract. So to not attract those types of people and those types of situations, you have to look at yourself and set proper boundaries that repel those people, basically, right?
I mean, to not gravitate towards those kinds of people, or if you do gravitate towards an individual like that, it needs to be like, it can still be someone who at least is also aware of their stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then can be like, oh, okay. And then like can also work on it, right? Like that's also, but like, for example, like when I met you, I was in recovery for codependency since 2000 and I'll say like 10, 11, so for me, like I was going to CODA meetings, which are meetings for people who are codependent, Codependents Anonymous, and
Oh, I didn't know
also,
they had that.
yeah, CODA, CODA. And then I also went to Al-Anon meetings because Al-Anon touches on codependency, but Al-Anon is meetings for loved ones of addicts, alcoholics, right?
Mm.
So I was going to those meetings for quite some time, did the whole thing, blah blah, did the whole program, and then really worked on myself in therapy and doing the steps and etc. Then I went from being extremely codependent severely to then having like crazy firm boundaries. Like everything was a no. Like it was like
Yeah.
no, 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 like, and then throughout time, I managed to kind of find this like, middle area of balance
Which
with
is
it,
probably
right?
pretty typical, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's how change works, right?
Yeah.
What was interesting is that when I gravitated to you and you gravitated to me, although I was, like still, like, I mean, still recovering, right? Because my codependency, just like any addiction, I can regress, it's just now a matter of if I see that I'm falling backwards,
Mm.
I'm able to be like, hold up, and then
Yeah.
catch myself and reel myself in, right?
Mhm.
So for you, when we gravitated to each other, I actually noticed that you were codependent
Mhm.
and you didn't even realize it. But what was interesting was that you were very open and willing to like hear what I meant about hear
Mhm.
why I thought that,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
We talked about your family, talked about all the things that you were doing,
Mm.
talked about setting healthy boundaries. And now you're actually like you've actually done a pretty good job. You actually done like really well with that because now you're like you have some good boundaries. You still, I think, have moments,
Yeah.
definitely, but now we can like openly talk about it, and I'll be like, hey,
Yeah. Yeah.
look
Yeah.
at what you're doing,
Yeah.
which is actually also very interesting because two codependents usually will not gravitate to each other,
Mm. It's
and
crazy.
that's the case because again, I codependent A needs to be needed.
Mm.
They like to take care of, etc. Codependent B needs to be needed, likes to take care of, etc. So why would they both be together? This would not work.
But maybe
It
there
just so
was.
happened though that when we met, I was at such a different level of it, right?
Mm.
And already have like a healthy understanding, healthy boundaries, etc. I wouldn't say you were like poster child. I was poster child when I was really in it.
Mm.
I wouldn't say you were when I met you.
It was with certain things, I
It was
think.
really well, it came out in
Family.
work with you
Yeah.
at that time, and it
Work
also
and
came out a
family.
lot with your family.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe our attraction was more based on like I was actually maybe subconsciously starting to be more conscious of it and like searching for that energy that could help me resolve
Mm.
things.
Mm-hmm.
And you had already gone through the experience, and that's where I don't know. The world
Yeah,
works crazy.
I mean, at the end of the
Energies.
day, I think that if we were both in the thick, like if I was in the thick of my codependency and you
Mm.
were like in the thick of it, it wouldn't really work because again, I would be at that point someone who really didn't like other people to take care of me
Mm.
because I like to be the caretaker, which is also why I kind of had a hard time when I had Soul when we had the baby, right?
Mm.
And you essentially had to just take care of me.
Mm.
Remember, I stopped working, I
Mhm,
went on
mhm.
maternity leave, I owned my
Oh,
own
right.
practice. So I wasn't, you don't get paid if you don't work when you own your own business, especially as a therapist. So you had to take care of like all my bills at a certain point, all everything. And
I remember
I
that, yeah.
I was like, ugh. It like it was like the most like appalling thing that I've done. I was like, this is, and I looked at myself like I was like, ugh,
But then you got very used to that
I got
after
very used to that. I was like, shit, this is great. Someone taking care of me. This is wonderful.
And I was okay with it. I think I'm okay with it still to a certain point though. It's like I could never just like I've broken up with girls because
But
they expected that
but
shit.
interesting enough though is that you've broken up with girls because they expected that, but you also were the one that went above and beyond to also take care of girls. Like you did a lot.
Hmm.
So it's like interesting because you didn't like it, but at the same time you were feeding into it because it was feeding into some of your shit.
Mm. Yeah, interesting. But there was definitely something there that I knew that I just didn't like. It wasn't like feeling good, but I still did it because I thought that was like the right thing to do, you know?
Mm.
Yeah. And I'd probably go complain to my friends about it.
Right. Typical fucking codependent, you know?
Right.
So yeah, so another thing too that I wanted to say about codependency is that I feel like people who are codependent have like this level of empathy, but on steroids. Like, I feel like they take empathy and they don't really know what a healthy level of empathy is. And then they use that to make it seem like they're just being empathetic. But it's like, well, let's really break down what empathy means. You know, like a healthy level of empathy in terms of what that looks like is someone's ability to see someone else's life, right? Or what they're going through, be able to see it from their view, from their perspective, which is hard for a lot of people to do. People can do that. People say they're empathetic, but then what ends up happening is I'll throw out a wrench and I'll give them a completely like crazy example of empathy. And then it's like, oh no.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, then you're not you're not empathetic. If you're telling me that you're only empathetic towards, you know, something like, oh, well, you know, I'm taking really big things right now, but like, you know, immigrants, let's say, right? You know, having to be taken out of here and kind of, you know, brought back to their country, you empathize with that. Okay. But then I could be like, okay, well, you know, there's this 15-year-old kid who is a white supremacist and da, 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 and stuff like that. And then suddenly you could be like, oh, well, fuck him.
Right.
And it's like, well, I'm confused because if I'm using empathy in a healthy way, then I'm able to get into everyone's perspective.
Situation.
I don't care where you come from, you know, and I'm able to break it down and I'm able to kind of be like, damn, you know what I'm saying? Like that sucks. Like R. Kelly, for example, crazy example, right? Crazy example. R. Kelly, what he did and what he got arrested for and went to prison for, awful. I don't fucking condone any of that shit, right? I'm not about it. No, it's not okay. But because I've heard about his life and I've heard about his past and how he was raised, it's not like, unfortunately, a far-fetched thing. Like clinically in my mind, I'm like, well, that unfortunately makes really awful sense in a really distorted, dysfunctional way. And I empathize with him just because of what he had to go through in life, right? Which was also awful as well. The whole situation was fucking awful. Everything, you know?
That's the best way to like get to really hone in your empathy on someone is if you look at them as a kid, like a baby almost, right? And then you think about and you understand how their situation was. You understand the environment that they grew up in and the people that raised them. And the more you understand that, the deeper levels, then you can, like, if you were talking to R. Kelly and he's like, yeah, my dad used to like rape me every night when I was like 5 years old, blah, blah, blah. Then you're like, okay, I don't like what you did as an adult, but we know where it comes from, so I get it. But at some point,
again,
you
like
should have, you had to have figured that out.
You had to have worked on that, right, exactly. You know, and like when I say like I get it too, I don't want people to take it as like I'm saying, oh no, I get it. It makes it right. Like it's totally okay.
No,
I just mean like again, like I'm thinking of things like on a clinical level, like clinically, it makes sense coming from a very dysfunctional brain, right?
Actually, that's where, remember I used to talk to you about your mom like that, right? And me and your mom, we used to have really deep discussions and she would tell me about her mom and stuff. And then I'd come back and be like, did you know this about your mom and how her mom treated her and blah, blah, blah. And I think that's kind of what kind of helped you in a way kind of start seeing your mom in a different perspective, right?
Well, what helped me to have empathy with my mom was when I went to the family session with her, actually. That's really what did it for me. And then when she told me what the trauma was, what my grandmother
either
did,
way.
That's when I was like, holy
when you had to hear it straight
shit,
from her,
you know? But so empathy ties into codependency. Now, the thing about empathy, though, too, and this is why it's codependency on steroids, is because people can like empathize, but then as they're empathizing, take on the other person's
Mm.
feelings and thoughts and everything
Mm.
as if that's theirs.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And now it's like they're like living it so much so
Mm.
so now it's affecting their life
Mm-hmm.
and their mood and their everything, and now they're crying about it, and now it's like, what can I do I'll do anything to help this person, or da da da, whatever it is. Now we're
Yep.
getting into, I would say, an unhealthy level of empathy, and now that's turning into, or going into this whole
Well,
codependent way.
this is where like the media and their hyper focus on certain things,
Oh my God.
such as the immigration and stuff, it makes people really dive into it, and they give scenarios, and they have interviews with like one of the immigrants that got kicked out, one of like a million or whatever, and it gets people connected in that emotional way, and then it's like, oh, I have so much empathy for them. But what about, the kid next door that's getting beaten every day or something?
So I love how you just said this, because I didn't even tell you how I was gonna bring Elon Musk into this
Oh, okay.
but you hit it right on the head.
Nice.
So I'm on Instagram earlier, and just doing my like scroll. I haven't been on it all day. I'm just kind of like checking in what's going on with the world, because I just don't know. And so I see a few like posts, just a few posts of like, and they were clips. They were just short clips that were like mixed in with like another clip. So it was just like not even the full clip
Mm-hmm.
of Elon Musk recently on the Joe Rogan show. And the clip was Elon Musk talking about empathy. And what he said was, and I have the clip actually, so if you want to pull it up, but what he was talking about was how
Cool.
the worst thing for like Western civilization, I guess, is this thing called like is like the exploitation of empathy.
Mm.
Um, and I was like, immediately when he said that, I was like, all right, well, now I'm interested in kind of listening to the whole thing. So I went on a deep dive to really hear everything he was saying versus just a little clip, because that's
Mm-hmm.
what people do. Because people were posting it as though it was this like, oh my God, Elon Musk said that empathy is awful, like he hates people. But I was like, I don't know if he would like say that. So let me like do my own research.
Right.
So I went on, listened to the whole thing, and actually what he was talking about is how there is this exploitation.
Is that
No, but that's what
not it?
people are posting.
Oh, okay. Let's play both of them then.
People are posting that to make it seem like he said this awful thing. But so what he was saying was that Western civilization has exploited empathy, and now they've used it in this like weaponizing way. Which is kind of what you were just saying.
Mm.
So it's
All
like,
right, let's find this
again,
one.
there's a fine line of empathy. I can empathize with someone, and I can say, fuck, man, like to see it from their perspective, like this must be awful, horrific, like I can't even imagine, and I can feel tremendously for that person in that situation. But there has to also be a healthy boundary with that. I can't like, sweep in and like save everyone, right? Like I don't have the means to do so.
Right.
I wish I could do so, but I can't. The only thing that I feel like I can do in my own life is to make sure that I'm continuing to be this really caring, kind, loving human being, so that I can pay it forward and hope that the next person pays it forward, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But like I can't take your pain on.
Right.
It's not mine.
And that's what
like I have my own,
Yeah.
like I can't take your pain on, but that doesn't mean that I don't give a shit. That doesn't mean that I don't empathize with you. It just means that I can't take your pain on, like I don't want you to take mine on. It's not yours to take on.
Right. And this is a healthy way of thinking.
Yes.
Right. Now, this is where the media comes in, and this is where you're getting propagandized. When the media is pushing all this stuff on you and kind of feeding your emotions into feeling like you need to care about this country on the other side of the world and all the little details of it, as opposed to your own country or your own neighborhood or your own family or whatever. And I'm not saying that they're saying like, oh, you shouldn't think about your own family, but
Yeah.
like it's so bombarding of like this that you almost forget about the things at home, and you're just hyper focused on what the media is pushing in an emotional way to get you attached to this thing where you have no control over that. You personally, yes, I care if like a kid is getting killed in Ethiopia, but like
Mm.
I know I have no control over that right now. So what I do have control over is myself, my own body, my family. Well, I don't even have control over my family or my community, but at least I
Right.
have some sort of say in that. And even in my state, and even at the country level, there's voting or whatever. But like that is way out of reach in freaking Africa or
Right.
Ethiopia or whatever. Like so, I can't use any of my energy on that. And by me saying that, that's a healthy statement, don't you think?
Yeah, like again, like I think that like I'll work with a lot of people who are like empaths, for example, Now being an empath is actually kind of also that could be a very like spiritually healthy thing, but if you don't know that you're an empath and you don't know how to utilize that,
You're just feeling
then
everything.
now you're feeling everything. You're taking it on. You're crying about things
Mhm.
that you can't do anything about.
Mhm.
You now have depression. Da 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 da. The world's an awful
It's a
place.
big responsibility to
It's
have
a
that.
huge responsibility.
And you no one person needs to feel that way or take that on. Even an empath.
It's too much. It's too much.
Yeah. So a healthy empath would have to set boundaries for themselves to not. He's very tired.
He is very tired.
Cashy was sleeping under here. Now he's
Come
he
down.
took off.
Come on. Come lay down.
You don't want to be here no more.
Yeah, but the door is closed up there.
Oh. Am I gonna open it? All right, keep going.
Yeah. So anyway, with the whole, so that's where we kind of have a fine line between empathy in a healthy way, empathy in a not so healthy way, and then also how empathy in a not healthy way creeps into people who are codependent, because they'll use the empathy piece, but they don't know how to even set healthy boundaries. So there's no healthy boundary setting within the ability to empathize, which is why it becomes a very unhealthy situation at that point. So yeah, so I wanted to tie that in because when Elon Musk was talking about it, and when I actually did listen to the whole thing, he did say very clearly, if anyone has seen this, I want to again encourage you to just make sure that you're looking at full clips and
Right.
going down the whole thing. But he did actually say, he was like, I think empathy is good. I think empathy is great to have, but not when it's being used to exploit situations and to weaponize. And I'm like, okay, I mean,
Right.
I hear
It's
what he's
it's funny. I'm looking through X right now, and
It's
all the videos that are only like 10 seconds long are all the ones like shitting on what he's saying. But the ones that are like a minute or 2 minutes long that
Yeah.
give the full context are saying the complete opposite.
I completely understood everything he said. There was nothing that he said in my mind that was
I mean, this one is a full minute. Do you think that's enough? I mean, or was it longer than that?
No, yeah, you can play that one right there, probably.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Well, either way, we can make a point of it. Okay. Start this one over.
So that we've got civilizational suicidal empathy going on. And it's like, I believe in empathy. Like, I think you should care about other people, but you need to have empathy for civilization as a whole and not commit to a civilizational suicide.
Also, don't let someone use your empathy against you so they can completely control your state and then do an insanely bad job of managing it and never get removed.
There's the fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy. The empathy exploit. They're exploiting a bug in Western civilization, which is the empathy response. So, and I think empathy is good, but you need to think it through and not just be programmed like a robot.
Right. Understand when empathy has been actually used as a tool.
Yes, like it's weaponized empathy
Yeah.
is the issue.
Yeah.
Weaponized empathy. And
Right.
yeah.
So he's not talking about empathy in terms of empathy.
He's talking about what I was talking about.
When empathy is being used as a weapon.
Right.
You know,
As
that's what he's talking about.
propaganda.
Right.
From the news telling you that you need to care about these things so they can go start wars and make billions of dollars.
Right.
It's got nothing to do with you or us here. It's got nothing. There is no harm. I don't know. I can't really get too far into this because
I don't want to go down. I don't want to go down the path. I was just wanting to like connect, you know, like in terms of empathy, and codependency.
Right.
But anyway, bringing it back to codependency, just to kind of share, I think, more of what codependency can also look like. So, and this is just, it could look like lots of things, but in terms of like the core traits, in terms of how someone's living. So a lot of times, let's say when, again, in the field of addiction, which is one of like my specialties, I used to work a lot with families, right? So a lot of the parents, a lot of the spouses, a lot of all of that. And I would run family weekend, and family weekend was like this weekend where all the families would come and they would like, we would have this like big, huge group room of like every patient that we had and their parents, which was freaking phenomenal. I will say that, but very intense. And man, I would speak to these parents. I would speak to parents who like had like heart surgery. They're like, you know, they were like in their 50s and had heart surgery, and how it started was because they had a severe level of anxiety. Anxiety turned into high blood pressure, all this stuff. Then they started having heart issues, blah, 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 and had to get surgery. And it all was because they were literally so emotionally and mentally drained in their codependent life, doing everything for their child has taken their wedding ring, pawned it, done this, done that, told the drug dealers where the money was in the house, had their parents' house get robbed, all this stuff. And meanwhile, the parents are still like, they're still living, right? They're still living here, but I'm trying really hard, and I told him he can't do this and blah blah. But it's like they're taking on and doing all this stuff, not realizing that you're actually really not even helping the situation. You're now making it 10,000 times worse, because what addict would not love to be in a situation where I could fucking lie, cheat, steal, and get high and still live in your house? That's like a fucking win, you know? So it also creates an extreme amount of like medical issues as well as other mental health issues, right? Other examples also of like just being in, again, the codependent, and again, I'm using addiction so much because it's so common in addiction, you know, or just like mental health in general. But when I was in my relationship, what's interesting is that prior to, oh, wait a minute, this is so crazy. Now that I'm thinking about it, it just hit me just in this moment. I was actually about to say prior to this relationship, I actually didn't really have many codependent traits, but now I'm thinking about it. And in the relationship I had before that relationship, I was codependent in a sense where like I pushed aside everything to make sure that like I was always there for that person. He never asked me to, but like I did, right? So like I ended up not seeing my friends as much or anything like that, and like everything was like him. We lived together, blah blah. Like everything became about this person. Because if I did this, right, and if I showed up this way, then again, the irrational thought for me in that time was, then they won't leave, right? Or then they'll love me, or whatever it is, right? And again, this comes from, again, trauma, right? This is why codependency comes from trauma. But so clearly I was engaging in those behaviors beforehand, but they didn't get so severe, I'll say, until the relationship with my ex, who is an addict or was an addict. And in that relationship, it went from, oh my gosh, it went from us meeting, dating, to then me getting an apartment, then him texting me or calling me saying that him and his mother were gonna get kicked out of their of this house, and And if he has nowhere to live, then he has to go with her. And that means that they're going to leave Florida. So what do?
You take them both in.
I take them both in. That's what the codependent does.
I've never even heard the story, and I know.
I
I
take
already
them.
know.
I take them both in. So then I break my lease in this apartment because it was just a 1-bedroom. I then find an apartment that has 2 bedrooms for me, my boyfriend, his mother, and his younger brother.
Jesus. And you paid all the rent and everything?
I end up paying the
What a
rent.
sucker.
I end up doing all of that because, well, he's having a hard time finding a job.
Yeah.
And I have, and that's okay. And this and that. And he had a hard life, which is true. He had a hard life and lots of trauma and this and that. His sister passed away, blah, 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 blah. Right now it's like, oh my God, I got to be here for him and stuff like that. And I don't want him to leave. Right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like now I have to do all this stuff. That went on for 5 years.
Crazy.
That went on for 5 years. Also, when he didn't have a job, guess what I did? Oh my goodness. Well, let me be the one to help you get a job. I'm going to not only make your resume for you, but I'm going to now look for jobs that I feel that you're qualified for, send the resume as though I'm you to those jobs. And when they respond to me, I'm going to respond back as though I'm you.
Wow, that's deep. That's a
Yeah.
lot. That's a
Yeah.
lot of work.
Yeah. I was poster child codependent, guys.
Wow.
Like hardcore, and that's what it was for 5 years. It literally, like when I tell you that I have no memories of hanging out with like my best friends at that time, none.
You're too busy.
I was so focused. And again, not once did he ever, well, there was emotional manipulation because there was lots of threats like, oh, well, if you do this, then I'm going to leave, like, and all these things.
Well, then he
and I'd be
started
like,
leaning into it,
exactly, and then that's when I started doing the CODA after that, because he went to treatment, went to CODA, went to Al-Anon, the whole 9. So started really getting healthier boundaries, working on myself. Was, I would say, sober, we'll say, right, or abstinent from codependency for, I would say, like 2 years at that point. Then I found myself in another relationship with another addict.
And it crept back in.
And this is now, we're back in New York. And we're in New York. He was an alcoholic, and it crept back in. And I had brought him to my dad's house. I'll never forget this. Brought him to my dad's house. He met my family, and we spent the night at my dad's house. Wake up 7 o'clock in the morning, and he's like, "I have to go get a beer." And I just remember feeling really like,
oh, really?
Yeah, I was just like, this doesn't feel good, but there was a part of my brain that was like, oh, he's like so sick and like maybe I can help, like type of thing. So that went on. This is then cut to the hotel. This is the relationship where then he got kicked out of his apartment, called me. I then end up going to go give him the money. However, as I'm halfway there, I pull over and I call my support systems back in Florida who know that I'm codependent and who can snap me out of it, because I was like, this isn't right. So I called them like I was calling a sponsor.
Oh my God.
And I was like,
they have that whole
yeah,
center? That's kind of cool.
And I was like, hey girl, I am on the side of the road right now, and I'm about to go to this hotel to go give this guy that I'm dating money for this hotel, but he's like an alcoholic and and she's like, leave. Go home.
Right. Go live your life.
Go home. And I was just like, okay. I was like, okay. And it snapped me out of it. And ever since that day, I think I would say the last time I've regressed since then, and that was back in, it's like, again, like 2012, 13, around there, 14, would be when I had Soul. Because then now when you're a parent, it's hard sometimes when you're codependent and a parent to find that gray area, because, well, I'm a parent. And so I'm supposed to.
You still dabble in that now. And
right.
I do too. Yeah.
I'm supposed to be there for her and do all these things for her. Right. But it was so much. And what was I doing? I was like a clown every single day with her. Right. Remember? I would do I would do these like huge dances and all this stuff just to make her laugh and not like, and like all this like dramatic stuff. But then I had to keep doing it over and over again.
Bigger and bigger every time.
And bigger and bigger. And then I was like, this is nuts. You know what I'm saying? And then I realized that I was overcompensating, that it was my codependency, and I had to pull back. But So parents also, I think you mentioned parents earlier.
Mhm.
And that's a hard thing for parents because again, I think in our
That's
core, we want to help. In our core,
yeah.
we want to be there for.
Well,
In
you
our
got
core,
because
we want to.
you know, I've just recently thought about this. It's like you're as a parent, you're like, all right, my job
Yeah.
is to teach this little being everything, all the fundamentals,
Right.
right? So as you're doing that, it's kind of tough, especially as they get older, because initially you're doing all that and it's okay and that's what you do. But then as they get to 5, 6, 7, it's like you got to kind of take a little step back, I think, and let them go and fuck up because that's the time, you know. But it's hard because you don't want to see your kid get hurt. You don't want to see them to do the wrong thing, and you know you already know what the outcome is if they do the wrong thing. But in a way, you got to just let them do it, and that's the hard part as a parent, I think,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because technically you're supposed to be, you have all this knowledge that they don't have, and you're supposed to be showing them so they don't make the same mistakes. But as like a little kid, you kind of want them to make the mistakes, but not as hard and as often as you did, you know,
But
like something like
and
that.
not
Get
even
a
as a little
taste of
kid,
it.
not even as a little kid, because I mean,
Well, yeah,
again,
I mean, as they grow,
right.
it gets
Like
more and more.
again, working with parents who, I would say would fall into the codependency, area. And their kids are suffering from either, mental health illness, right? So whether it be severe anxiety, depression, whatever it is, or they're addicts, alcoholics, right? Man, as a mom now and as a parent now, when I do work with them, first of all, I have a shitload of empathy because I'm like, I don't know what I would do. Like logically, and the healthy thing in my heart that I hope I would do is to really set healthy boundaries, right? Because I don't want to give into their shit and make them more sick, right? But man, I mean, I heard this situation the other day. She's a parent and she has a kid, but the kid's like an adult, like a young adult,
Mhm.
But it's like, she's on drugs, this and that, getting into trouble, blah, blah, almost, killed someone and herself in a DUI, all these things. Life is just, and as a parent, you're just like looking at your kid like, oh my God, like what happened, like where did I, right? Like what can we do? And like, I don't want to, I don't want you to die.
Right.
Like I don't want you to die, whether it's from drugs, alcohol, or whether it's from depression, suicidal thoughts, like I don't want you to die. And it's so hard, I'm sure, for any parent, as I'm even talking about it, I'm like, to actually have to set what is a healthy boundary and say, I can't do this.
Right.
Is like, that's gotta be the most gut-wrenching fucking thing. Like I would have to literally go back into therapy for that if that was
But
my
hold on.
situation. Like I'd be like, mm-mm.
In that situation, for that child, have you ever seen a teenager grow up to be somebody like that like either wants to kill themselves or a drug addict or whatever, right? Have you ever seen that and the parents are completely healthy and have done all the right things?
Well, first of all,
Have you ever seen that?
let's be clear here, okay? There's no parent that is completely healthy. There's no person that's completely healthy, and there's no parent that's going to do all the right things. So that's first and foremost.
Right. I guess that was
I just want to be clear.
I already knew that as I was
Yeah,
saying
I'm
that,
like,
but
there's no.
I'm just saying like people that are actively working on themselves and trying their best and not, you know what I'm saying? Like in a dynamic like that where like everybody is aware and they're like communicating and they're open to hearing opinions and stuff like that. Like in that environment, can that teenage situation even flourish and develop into that? I feel like it cannot.
Wait, in a
In a-
environment where it was healthy.
Yes. Like a healthy dynamic between the parents and the child. All since they were born until they're teenagers. Can a child still like just go rogue and like not give a fuck about anything that they learn growing up in the environment?
Well, yeah, because we have to also consider that. I mean, a lot of parents who I work with, right, will tell me that they feel like they did everything that they could to provide a healthy environment.
Right.
right? Like, so, and
Most parents probably would.
many of them did, did they,
Did they really?
did they, yes, many of them did, many of them didn't, right? But by did, I mean, like, they're people too, right? So obviously
Yeah.
they're going to fuck up, right?
Yeah.
But like a fuck up that, let's say, as an adult and as a parent, in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, that shit, like, I get it, to a kid, like, because kids don't understand that, could turn into a huge trauma when
Yeah.
you didn't even really obviously mean for that or want that to happen.
Right.
So it really is dependent on how your child's brain processes what happened.
But also, what about like the parents recognizing that the child took it in a certain way over maybe some time,
Well, I mean, you
and
don't,
then communicating
you
with
would only really know that if there was obviously like communication, right? So like if like I would know that if, let's say, I sat with my kid and we had a good enough relationship where if I was like, hey, like, like, I know that, the other day, like, I said this or whatever, like, did that, like, did you take it,
Mm.
like, in a certain way? And if you did, I really want to know, like that. And if my child could talk to me and actually tell me,
Mm.
yeah, this is how I took it, now I connect, right? But you would only know if that was happening, right?
Yeah.
Which is why, again, communication. So
I'm even like starting to like, because Soul will say like, oh, your breath smells like when I wake up, or something like that, right? And I don't get offended by it, and I'm trying to keep those doors like, I'm glad she's telling me some shit I don't want to hear about myself.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm trying to encourage those moments when I see it and I just bite my tongue. Be like, shut the fuck up, you little
sometimes
asshole.
I do come back at her like I think it was this morning. She was like, your breath smells, and I was like, your breath smells.
Yeah.
like, well, guess what? All of our breath smell. Okay, it's the morning.
Yeah, and well, that's just like a little thing, but there's like other things too, that I'm trying to be aware of when she like is criticizing me. Like I want to encourage that actually, because that leaves that door open, like
Yeah. No, yeah, I like when she does that too. The other day when she told you that you didn't remember, she was like, well, you just didn't remember.
yeah.
And I was like,
Well, Daddy,
damn.
you didn't remember. Yeah,
Like,
well, that was bullshit though. Whatever the fuck it was bullshit because I did fucking remember. She doesn't remember what happened 3 hours ago.
She doesn't.
Ugh.
So anyway, so wrapping this up because it is 9:30 and I want to chill for a little bit. Yeah, so do you have, before we like wrap up, like do you have any like questions or anything? Do you feel like
I've had all kinds of like thoughts on like there was one point I was thinking, I was like, all right, so this is exactly why if you're somebody dating out there, like, and you're looking for, you have a specific person in mind, you've been dating for a while, you know exactly what you're looking for, you're very aware of yourself, don't like just be okay with like a situation. Say you start dating somebody and you're like, oh, they have most of the things, but oh, they have this potential to be better at this, whatever. Potential is bullshit. Oh, it's not bullshit because some people do have potential, but like, you don't have to put yourself through this. Now I'm kind of going on a rant here.
Well, I don't think you're going on a rant. I feel like you're just not saying it.
Yeah, I might not be
you're
saying
not structuring it.
I'm saying it probably in a very direct, mean way. But basically what I'm saying is like, the potential is probably there, but it's not your job to raise that person up to
right. It's not your job.
Wherever you think
It's
that they need to be, right? Because guess what? You can start dating. You can find a million people that are right where you need them to be right now today. And then you guys can grow together, as opposed to having to like cater to some things. And then you kind of could fall into the codependency situation depending on the other person, right?
Well, right. And I want to be clear with the potential aspect also, is that like, if you find someone and you feel like they have a lot of potential, but you actually get to know them more and you see that they are implementing,
if they're working on it, okay, yes, you're right,
to actually hit that potential, then that's perfectly fine, because we're all not going to grow at the same
you're right
speed, right? But if I'm like, dating someone in the beginning and I see they have so much potential, but over time, over a month, 2 months, they keep saying that they want to do this, but they're not doing anything to make it happen.
Right.
Like there's no movement.
But that's my
Then
whole
it's
point
like,
right
well, that's
there,
not my
though. You
fucking
just
job.
wasted 2 months. See, I was so hyper focused on this shit because I had been in those situations and I had seen the potential, and I wasted a year, 2 years, and the potential
Well,
never.
years like
that,
too much. I mean,
then
you
I'm
should have
like,
caught.
I should have.
That's on you.
But that was my fault because I was codependent, right? So
Right, that's on you. You should have caught
well,
that shit
this is
early.
what I'm saying. All these like thoughts were going through my mind while we've been talking here, and yeah, I'm just saying, like, yeah, okay, fine. If you want to burn a couple months and see how it goes, then yeah, do it. And if they seem like somebody that's worth your time to like light on fire, possibly, but don't waste more than a couple months, I would say, right? If you're not seeing any kind of like action
Yeah,
towards
if you're not
those,
seeing any action, I think that it is healthy and okay to at least take a step back for a moment and kind of like think about that. Like, okay, like
especially if you've
like
had
this is where
conversations
right,
too.
like this is where I know I want to go in life, and this is where like the things that I want to do. Like I've been with this person now for like 2-3 months, and they've been saying all these things, but they're not doing anything in any way, shape, or form to actually make that happen or make any of these things happen. Like it's all talk and no movement. That's when I have to step and go, okay, what move do I want to go here? Now, a codependent would actually just dive into that shit and be like,
Right.
I am here.
I am gonna fix this
I will
person.
fix you.
Mm-hmm.
Type of thing. But it is healthy to kind of go, I don't know. I want someone who actually is implementing things to actually grow, like and
Right.
actually do what they have to do. So
Right. Like, I mean, this is my hyper focused way of thinking, but like a very small percentage, like your role in a relationship, I think, is more of like support. Like if the other person's they're working on their thing, but they're having trouble working through it, then yes, have the conversation, blah, 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 and raise them up to the next level. And then you kind of let them go and figure things out. And then you have another conversation, right? But like if you're having to like have these conversations and nothing's happening, it's like I was just at the point where I'm like, all right, I could figure it out from the first fucking date. Like, oh, you have potential, but you're not really. I already know this
well,
is.
yeah, I
I'm
mean
not
that's
lighting
like
months on fire here anymore. It's like
you
yes or
eventually
no.
get good. So well, I feel like too with dating, you eventually kind of get good the more you date.
Yeah,
You get better with like picking up on like red flags or
yeah,
like things that you consider to be a red flag.
yeah. Like if you're really like looking for the one, you need to fucking date a lot, like multiple times a week.
Oh yeah.
Like see him, coffee, see you later, coffee, see you later. Coffee specifically because it's very cheap. I was really splurging on you with the breakfast thing.
Splurge.
Yeah. Good thing that was a good place though, and they had good espresso martinis.
My
And then the espresso
Tinder-
martini really kind of like
My
all right.
Tinder pictures though were like really good. I feel like too. I was pretty hot.
You didn't have a lot though. I don't think you had a lot.
Yeah, I know that, but the ones I
Yeah,
did
sure.
have were on point.
Yeah, they were good.
Okay.
All right.
Well-
yeah. So if anybody has any other questions on this stuff, you guys can comment or
you can
write us an
send a
email or
DM.
whatever.
Also, if anyone, let's say, is listening to this and you're like, oh, I'm interested to just like hear more about this codependency thing, a really great read, they have it like also on Audible for anyone who's codependency, who's struggling from codependency, is called Codependent No More. It's like the Bible for every codependent. The way the way she breaks it down is so great because she goes into like scenarios that like many people have been in but never even thought about it as being something that, like wasn't healthy or whatever. So I really, really enjoy it. I highly recommend that you get it. If that's
Yo,
the case.
you know what? I do have one more question. I know we're like extending this, but why do you think that this is so common?
Codependency?
Yeah.
Well-
In maybe is it culture? Is it what do you think it is?
I think it's common, but I also think it's like the term is like overly used, so there's some like ups and down with that.
I
but
see this in almost every person I know.
well, you also have to understand culture has a big part to do with it too, right? So like for example, Hispanic culture.
Mhm.
You know, like, I mean, if you look at, like, let's say traditional Hispanic culture, there's a lot of like enabling that goes on. There's a lot of expectations for like children to take care of, or son to take care of, or whatever it is, or
Mm-hmm.
this and that, especially as parents get older. Asian culture, same thing, right? So I think that culturally speaking, it's, you know, it's something that's embedded in people, and we don't even realize that it's
Mm.
actually like not healthy, and that it's okay to say no to even family, you know? But a lot of cultures say that it's not okay, you know, and that family has to converse. You have to put all this stuff aside for everything, you know? So I think culture is one. And then also I think that, you know, I mean, like unhealthy environments, and we like unhealthy environments are a big part of the world, unfortunately. There's a lot of stuff that goes on, you know?
I wonder what its like natural value is in humans. Like, you know how like there's things that humans do that like aren't really functional in this day and age,
Mhm.
but like it's like primal or whatever with us. Like, what do you think like the codependency, do you think it just developed at certain point in like history
Well,
as we evolved as like
I mean, if we go back to
humans?
cavemen,
I
as you
love
would
doing
say,
that.
if we go back to
Yeah,
cavemen for
were
a
they
sec,
codependent
right?
back then?
And we kind of look
I
at
wonder.
the like the mindset, right, of that time. The mindset of that time is survival.
Hmm.
Um, meaning I will do anything to survive, right? Whether it's, you know, fucking eat this or kill this or whatever it is.
It was probably more
Now,
efficient back then. It was like you have a job, you have a job, you have a job, and
right,
that's it. And
right,
if you know you don't do it, you die.
right, you know. Now, where I could see maybe, I guess, the codependency or the creeping into a level of like high level would be like if now you're back in caveman times and you have a family,
Hmm.
right? So now I'm a mom, I have a kid in the fucking woods, you know, like we're like nature, nothing's around, no hospitals, no nothing. I know nothing. There's rocks and dirt everywhere, right? But there's animals and predators and
Mm.
all this stuff. Like now it's like shit. Like I gotta fucking like bend over backwards and fucking do the most, you know, to make sure that everyone survives here, right? Like I have to take
Mm.
care of fucking multiplied by 20,000 to make sure that my kid doesn't die, you know?
Yeah,
So I could see some aspects of that coming in, but I also feel like a part of caveman times was the mindset was just kind of like this happens, like this is survival. Do this, do that, do this, do
yeah.
that, you know? So I don't know.
That's why like animals and like birds and like fucking squirrels and shit, they just like ditch their kids at some point because it's just like, all right, move on and have more kids. And then it's like they
Bye.
either survive or don't survive, and you keep moving.
Right,
You know,
right.
and humans were I don't know, maybe it's weird because not every animal is like that. Like chimpanzees, they're kind of like
Well,
in
they're
a
like people.
tribe and stuff,
They're
like
like
in a
people, yeah.
group,
They're
right?
like humans.
And there's other animals that are like that too. It's weird. It's like it's interesting to
Yeah.
think about that.
Yeah.
Like where it kind of really started heavily creeping into society. You know, obviously maybe once we started coming into like bigger groups and stuff like that, maybe that's where it started creeping in. I don't know.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Something to think about,
Something to
guys.
think about. All right, everyone. I hope you have a good rest of your evening. Hope you get some good sleep.
I need to get sleep.
And hope you guys have a great week.